Hi, I'm Norman Perillo, a furniture designer maker at Perillo Design and a woodworking educator author at WoodSkills. So today I'd like to talk about the scale of your woodworking projects or your furniture, and how playing with scale in your furniture making or woodworking projects can motivate you to create more work, to be more prolific in your woodworking. When I refer to scale, I'm talking about, this is, for example, larger scale than this scale, and this scale is similar to this scale. So this is a jewelry box that I completed a few weeks ago of a certain scale, and this is a small tea cabinet that I've completed very recently, in the last few days actually. And this is a cabinet. Normally I create cabinets on stand in my furniture making. This is a typical example of my work. It involves a case construction. It involves doors to become the focal point of the furniture piece, and it involves an internal layout that consists of compartments with drawers. Now, this is just one layout. I'll show you 3 or 4 images of some of my other cabinets, and they all follow the same style. And this is a style I've developed over the years, and I enjoy this particular style. It's very contemporary. But if you notice the interior layout, it very much resembles this tea cabinet. And I'll explain how I've gotten to this tea cabinet and this jewelry box through this furniture that I create. So maybe I'll just leave that open. So when you scale your work, scale it down, for example, your woodworking projects will become less intimidating, and you're more likely to start a smaller project because there's less, not just less wood involved, but less complexity involved. It might fit your workshop space better. It's less risky and as a woodworking project because there isn't as much work involved, especially if you're on a learning curve and trying to understand joinery and how wood movement interacts with joinery in a furniture woodworking project. So you need to determine the dimensions and the size of the project that works best in your workshop space. And I talk about this at length in my furniture design and making classes, courses, my online courses about adjusting the scale of your furniture, your woodworking projects to the size of your workshop, so it doesn't overwhelm the space. It's very, very important, because if you have too large a woodworking project or furniture, it just takes up so much space that you can't really start another project unless you've completed that project. And then of course you have the finishing stage, and it starts to mess with your motivation, because you really can't do anything unless you've got one project completed and then can't start another. Something on this scale, for example, you can have 1 or 2 of these projects in your workshop space at the same time. Another reason for scaling down your work is a joinery. Joinery in something of this scale, this cabinet on stand, it's not very much different from the joinery I use in this tea cabinet or in this fairly large jewelry box. There's rabbet joints, dovetail joints, frame and panel construction, drawer making in this example. So drawer fitting, drawer making. So I use a lot of the same techniques and skills in something of this scale and this scale as I've been using in a larger cabinet. And if we think about it, a cabinet on stand, or a cabinet, is essentially a case, which is a box, and the interior part is another box with compartments that's for drawers. So this can be laid out differently. As I've shown in the earlier images, you can lay them out asymmetrically or symmetrically to fill the whole space. But I sort of like this format, with a narrower top drawer and a little space for a decorative object in this space. So the similar skills apply to both large and small, is essentially what I'm getting at. The smaller piece, one of the advantages of a smaller piece like this, for example, is it allows you to focus on detail. So I spend considerably more time creating the pulls on this. They're handcrafted pulls of a different wood, and I also select the woods because there's so little wood involved on something like this scale and this scale. I can spend more time selecting the wood and the grain pattern. So in this case, if you notice, the case itself has a wraparound grain, and I've gone to great lengths to cut the pieces so the grain wraps around, and it's much more aesthetically pleasing to view something like that. If this were part of a case, the interior of a case, you wouldn't really need to have that, because the sides of the drawer compartments are actually hidden within the case. So it's really, the focal point becomes their drawer fronts in this case, and maybe perhaps the top of the case, the interior case. So when I create a larger piece of furniture like this, I actually build it in 2 steps. I create the case with the doors, and then I create the interior portion, which is also a case, and I embed one within the other. So back to the smaller scale. Smaller pieces allow greater artistic freedom, and you can experiment with more designs in less time. And that's important when you're starting out, or even if you're starting out or you're an intermediate woodworker, you're still on quite a substantial learning curve, so you can experiment more with designs and something of this scale, as opposed to tackling a large project like this that just not so much more complexity, but it's just larger, and there's so much more to it that it just takes up so much of your time that you might actually abandon it after a while. So depending on if it's motivating to you to continue, or if you run into some obstacles in building it. But this is more of something small, and you can complete it in less time, and so you maintain that enthusiasm throughout the project. Also, the smaller piece like this, or smaller scale piece, involves less wood at far less expense, so that risk factor is removed, or it's greatly diminished from a larger piece like this with much more wood involved. And what I find that talking to my students and talking to a large number of woodworkers over the years, that they're intimidated with larger pieces, and I've made larger pieces in this also, because of the time you need to invest in building it, the skills, and the amount of wood, the financial investment. And so many things can go wrong, or they feel so many things can go wrong. So it's better to perhaps work with something like this on this scale. So this is a jewelry box with sliding trays. They're Kamiko interior, and I've actually got a video on this. I talk about this at length. So it's 3 levels of compartments, and it's something that a woodworker can tackle without too much of a problem, and the skills developed creating a jewelry box like this and a smaller, in this case a tea cabinet, you can apply those skills to something larger afterwards. So scale your work, and once you grasp the skills and the methods of joinery and understand wood movement, which is critical, then you can raise the scale of your work, or increase the scale and create something like this as opposed to this. So start small and slowly scale your work up to be comfortable with the project you're working on, the furniture. If you so desire, you can actually just stop and create this size of work. So to add to what I've been saying, is a cabinet is essentially a box, and in this case it's a box within a box with different interior layouts like I've been describing, and the larger box forms the case. The inner box forms the drawer compartments with drawers in my style of work. And this is just, imagine this is an exploded or a larger view of the inner compartments of a cabinet. And this is almost identical in size to the interior part of a cabinet that you've seen earlier images of. So I've actually removed this from the cabinet and made it its own standalone project or piece of furniture. So I can, instead of focusing on building the larger scale with the stand, I could just decrease the scale and create them and have this as a piece of furniture. So become familiar with creating and experimenting with interior layouts as a standalone small cabinet, such as this tea cabinet or this jewelry box. And notice the aesthetic is very similar of this tea cabinet, is very similar to the layout of my larger cabinets on stand I've just shown you. So once you become very proficient at creating something like this, you can incorporate it into a case, because a case is really essentially a box. It's just an outside shell for this piece of furniture. You can either compose your piece symmetrically or asymmetrically. In this case, this is symmetric and this is asymmetric, so I've left a little opening here for a small decorative object. Since the interior of the larger cabinet is enclosed. The grain orientation is less, grain harmony, I should say, is less of an issue. In this case, it's very prominent. So I've developed this project to feature the wraparound grain. You notice this is actually Douglas fir, and it wraps around completely. And I've used the proper joinery to allow it to wrap around without having any seams, without picking up any seams. So in a standalone tea cabinet, the grain is prominent, where wraparound grain is the design element, as I've mentioned, and I can actually incorporate that wraparound grain as a design element because it's a standalone piece of furniture, a small cabinet. And joinery features the wraparound grain. You need to take wood movement into account, consideration, as well as the type of joinery to handle the stresses and handling. So there is obviously less stress, wood stress involved in something of this size, so you can focus on the aesthetic more than a larger piece of furniture. And similar with this involves quite a few skills that you can apply to larger pieces of furniture. Joinery, laying out rabbet joints, laying out dados. In this case, there's a middle divider here that you need to establish to delineate the two drawers in this case. So there's a dado involved there. There's a rabbet joints for the drawer bottoms. Then the bottom portion, the cherry bottom, is a mitered frame with some strengthening. The rest of it is the actual cases, the small cases. The drawer compartments are wraparound mitered joints with some reinforcement from the back panel, which is glued in. In this case, the wood movement is horizontal, so it doesn't interfere with anything else. And I've also spent considerable time selecting wood for this particular piece. It's rift sawn Douglas fir. It's very beautiful wood, very light, and I've also set it up so there is some contrast in the front part of the case, both cases, and the rear part. It's just more of a subdued reddish color, or a faint red beige color, and this is very light. And the handles, of course, are custom made. They're a different wood completely. It's black limba, and the bottom part is cherry. In this case, this is an oak case that was formerly an oak mantle that I dismantled in our home. We've since modernized it with the more contemporary. We don't even have a mantle now, but this was the mantle in our home for 25 years. So again, in this case, because it's smaller, I could focus more on the interior. So I developed the interior layout as a Kamiko panels, a Kamiko separation. Instead of the typical rectilinear compartments you see in the jewelry box, something different. So you can experiment with smaller pieces, is what I'm getting at. It's another advantage of scaling down your work. So I hope you enjoyed this talk on scale of your furniture, and you apply some of what I've said to the scale of your woodworking projects. Scale it down. So if it's both your workshop space, less intimidating, less wood involved, you still apply some of the skills and techniques you would in a larger case. And then once you've created something like this, increase the scale and either have a box within a box or a box within a case, or similar. So please subscribe to my YouTube woodworking channel, where I share more of my woodworking techniques, my woodworking philosophy, my thoughts on woodworking, and all the challenges I've experienced, and I introduce some of the new forms of woodworking I've discovered. And also visit woodskills.com, where I have a good selection of my books, both in print and digital format, on woodworking, and all my online courses, and I also offer some woodworking plans. I have maintained a regular blog on what I've got going on in my workshop and in woodworking in general. So enjoy.